Welcome to the Bad Boss Brief. I am Stephanie Peirolo.
And I'm Eugene S. Robinson.
And we are at episode 71, which we are calling Stupid Tricks, Gender Conflict.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of that. I mean, there's a certain flavor to the news these days with Trump and his predilection for insulting female journalists that I find sort of, as a journalist, sort of compelling. I mean, the industry is beleaguered enough as it is without that kind of crap. But I find myself wishing for the days of a Sam Donaldson, and a lot of these women are filling that spot of just not taking any shit. Yeah, great. I'm a dumb piggy. Answer the question.
Right.
So strange times.
And I think that's a good point to bring up, because I feel like if we're going to talk about gendered conflict at work or in any sphere, we need to acknowledge the time in which we live. Right.
And your use of the word sphere is interesting, because there is now such a thing called the manosphere, where guys who have largely felt themselves to be silenced feel like they can talk. So,
right. And so what I was thinking about with this is there's a phrase that I use that is generally offensive to the men that I use it to, which is stupid men tricks.
Yeah.
And what I mean by stupid men tricks are consistent patterns of behavior that many men have been culturally taught are going to work for them, that they continue to perpetuate in work relationships or personal relationships, right? So an example of this would be, and a lot of these have been attached to kind of like catchphrases that have that therapy-esque tone, which is also problematic, of like gaslighting. That never happened. I never said that, right? Mm-hmm. Positioning, there's a series of behaviors that is called DARVO that is often recognized in abusive relationships, regardless of the gender, where there's a defensiveness, there's an attack, the person who is doing the bad behavior portrays themselves as a victim. There's a whole bunch of different patterns of behavior that I have taken after exposure to them, professionally and personally, my entire adult life, just calling stupid men tricks. And what I realized as I was thinking about that is that there's also plenty of things that men in professional or personal relationships over the years have talked to me about things that women do that are unskillful. And I was like, there's also stupid women tricks. Like, what if we, a man and a woman, had a conversation about some of these gendered behaviors, and do they exist? Are they gendered? What are our personal pet peeves about them? So what do you think? Shall we talk about gender?
Sure. I mean, but we are in a kind of really sort of uncomfortable cul-de-sac at this point in time where, if you're going to effort to read the headlines of some of these, personal items about how men and women, the relationships between men and women are more dire than ever. People are giving up on heterosexuality. Gen Z is finding it embarrassing to state that they have boyfriends, women who are feeling embarrassing to say that they have boyfriends. There's an article I read, I think in the New Yorker, where a woman said, I chose lesbianism. I was married for a long time, chose lesbianism, but I'm sick of hearing my straight female friends go, oh, you must have it so lucky because, it's just as difficult as anything else. So there really seems to be, more women to graduate from college, fewer men are. Articles about how women don't want MAGA men. MAGA men are complaining that they're being forced into incels. So there seems to be a lot of energy behind this failure to do what people have done for thousands of years, which is essentially, come to some peaceable domestic accord. So, I'm ready. This is going to be great.
And you mentioned incels and the manosphere. And I think one of the challenges is it seems to me that there's a bigger separation between the genders, right? That the manosphere is where men go who do not have the kinds of relationships, ideally, sexually or romantic relationships with women that they would like to. So they get together with a bunch of men and talk about the problems with that and the problems with women. And that I do think that there's a sensitivity where men and women are not talking to each other. Like I was talking to some women in their 30s who both were describing that they had very, very close men friends, like their best friends were men. And then as soon as they both got married to other people, there was this real like downtick in their conversations, right? That it was somehow considered to be suspect that these two people of different genders who were super close friends, texted each other, called each other, were together all the time. Now that they were married to different people, that was somehow suspect.
Well, you realize, of course, that's going to happen no matter what. I remember being shocked and surprised all the people who got married sort of within the first 2 years after college, and you didn't hear from them anymore. Moreover, they had parties and wouldn't invite you if you were not in a couple. So that kind of weirdness has happened for forever, and it's always confused. It's always confused me, baffled me. I think that I don't know. I mean, we brought this on ourselves. I'm going to blame Rosie Greer with, 1972 Sesame Street. It's all right to cry. Even big guys do it. Yeah, okay. And as we bred this generation of men, like, I don't like this World War II generation, the strong, silent type. I want to know what you're feeling. I want to know what you're thinking. And now in 2025, the men won't shut up. I personally find myself, avoiding conversations with men who are trying to get me in the heart-to-hearts about stuff I have zero interest in. It's like, where is that generation, the greatest generation of men who don't want to bend the ears of their male friends about some stuff that nobody cares about? That's the thing that most men need to embrace, this idea. It's okay that nobody cares about you. You should care about you. And leave it at that. That's it. But, of course, we're talking about this because it goes into the workplace. But yeah, go ahead. You're about to disagree.
Well, I do disagree.
You say you're completely wrong.
I disagree in that I think there's one of the patterns that comes up a lot that when women talk about their male spouses or partners is, and this is particularly in couples where the man is over 40. And I think the older you get, the more prevalent it gets. These men don't have close friends. Right? They don't have friends at all. Like, they may have a friend who they see once a year, or, will occasionally talk to if there's a wedding or a funeral or a birth of a child. But they don't have friends in the way that, my best friends and I talk regularly. Mary Virginia and I talk every day. Right. If she doesn't call me at lunchtime, her phone is like, why are you not calling Stephanie? Right. So there's an intimacy that builds, at least for me, builds community, builds support, really helps with just my navigating of life. And many men do not have those intimate relationships, not with family, not at work, not through hobbies, not through friendships. And I think
Are you assuming that they want these? Or are you assuming that they need these?
I am noticing that, and again, these are broad strokes patterns. I mean, I'm speaking in generalizations. Of course, there are people who would prefer to fly more solo, right? I myself am deeply introverted, and I have the number of close friends that I have, I could count on one hand. But we are pretty tight and do see and talk to each other frequently. So yes, I think that there are some people, male and female, who prefer to live a more isolated life. However, the challenge is that we do need connection as humans. And I think what happens is that these men who, whether circumstance or choice, eschew a network of personal connections, tend to put a lot of that weight onto their wife or female partner. And so the idea is, why do I need friends? I have you. We can do things together. We can hang out together. And there's an emotional labor to that. Whereas women often will know to kind of spread the wealth. Right? If I need to talk obsessively about whatever thing is on my mind about work, I'm gonna share. I'm gonna share with a couple different friends and realize not every friend wants to hear every nuance of whatever my bee in the bonnet is. But men don't always have that.
I'm laughing because I remember distinctly telling a former partner, "Don't complain to me about me. That's what your friends are for." And then she said something that she added a twist. She goes, "I don't complain to my friends because I don't want you sleeping with them." So it was a reverse Uno card. So I was like, okay, all right. I guess I have to listen. You complain to me about me. So,
but I think the point that I'm making is that my concern is that as we have continued to become more separated, we don't work or live or worship with people who look like us, vote like us. I mean, everybody looks like us, votes like us, thinks like us. We're in
Yeah.
these like little homogenous pods that I think we're less comfortable with conflict. And so we don't have conversations. Like, I think one of the things that's appealing, I mean, I don't know what people watching this podcast could better tell us, but like, how often do you have a man and a woman, you and I, talking about gender, talking about work, talking about race, like the idea that we can differ and stay in relationship and be curious about our perspectives or other people's perspectives, I think
Yeah.
is anomalous in the way that it might not have been 10 or 20 years ago.
And also, there's this weird thing that happens. I put up something pretty innocuous on Instagram, pretty innocuous personal observation. It took about 7 minutes before some guy came in with the hostility. And I go, this is and I just called it out for exactly what it was. I go, this is a perfect example of internet speak. It's baselessly hostile. There's absolutely no reason to bring hostility to this opinion. And then, of course, I see he felt personally attacked because, but you're an email address to me. There is no personal intent. You should be able to, like we talked about, hurt and harm. You should be able to distinguish between your feelings were hurt, but you were not harmed. So I think everything is pitched at a really high level, and I don't and I'm going to blame social media because
Yeah.
we've lived through the 80s and the 90s and I remember, music, bulletin boards and so on, and things got heated there. But now it's daily and it's constant. It's on your phone when you wake up and it's on your phone when you go to sleep. So yeah, it's made us, with all the powers of communication, it's made us less communicative. So
Right.
in a very
And
strange way.
it's been monetized. I mean, that's how the
Yes.
system is meant to work, right? Outrage
Sure.
gets more clicks. Well, let's
Right.
talk about some stupid tricks. Is there something that you can think of that as a man you have noticed women do generally or at work specifically that is challenging to you?
Yes, in a weird way that absolutely happened, but um, like, okay, in a work situation in which you have older men, I have systematically watched women in their 20s um, play them like fiddles. you know, I mean, up to and including the really obvious, dropping the pencil, covering the blouse because they open an extra button. I witnessed this, and the woman in question, I said, "Hey, could we talk?" After a meeting in which she was clearly playing this guy and winning, like succeeding in getting what she wanted to happen, and he was completely eating it up and buying it. And I realized, of course, that, again, back to reverse Uno, that I could have scuttled her effort. She using sexuality to get what she wanted with this older guy who was flattered by the attention, and and she was an attractive woman, but that's neither here nor there. I could have reversed Uno by saying, "Well, I think your critique is maybe racially motivated, so we should try to put this in context." But I couldn't actually bring myself to do that, and it was an exchange. I mean, this is editorial, so we're talking about taste issues, and she won that exchange, and I went back to him, I went back to her, and I went back to him separately, and she acknowledged that she would use what she had to do to get what she wanted. Fine. And he refused to acknowledge it. He was like, "Oh," because for him to acknowledge it would be to acknowledge that he had been played.
Right.
And and yeah, I'm just immune to that. I'm so in love with editorial that my focus was kind of monomaniacally on the editorial, and we were arguing over a word choice. And she pulled out the stops and she got her way, and it drove me absolutely crazy. And when I called her on it in the meeting I had with her separately, she started to tear up, and in my head, I thought, this is not real. And I just did this kind of hand wave. I go, "You stop, stop." And she instantaneously stopped. And I was like, "You just stop. You won, take your W and get the fuck out of my office. You got your word choice changed based on playing this 72-year-old guy from the Wall Street Journal, good on you, but I lost respect for both of them and myself sort of in the process. I mean, why was that word so important to me? Yeah.
Well, but I think, and what's interesting is that, so Tressie McMillan Cottom, who I'm a huge fan of hers, she says that beauty is the only power women get to wield without consequence in our society.
Yeah.
And it is fleeting. And it is also cyclical. What's beautiful one, period of time is not necessarily beautiful another period of time. And so I think it's interesting that you're talking about a dynamic where a woman is using her sexuality, using her conventionally attractive appearance to try to get more power, right? And I also think,
and what you're suggesting is very much correct there. Had she have gone in and said, listen, and presented facts and figures, and she on the basis of merit, she would have lost the argument.
Right.
So she did what she had to do to win the argument. So fair game.
Right.
Right.
And, which I also would agree is a stupid trick. And I think also, was this a white woman?
Yes.
So the white woman tears is another stupid women trick. And this has been written about a lot, and we've talked about it before, but I just want to acknowledge white women have been socialized to believe that if they turn on the waterworks, white men are trained to respond to that, no matter what is going on. And they talk about this a lot in circumstances where a woman of color, usually a black woman, is having a conflict with a white woman. The white woman is clearly at fault. A white boss comes in, or supervisor, or anybody sees the white woman crying and thinks, "What did you do to the black woman?" Yeah. Right? And so I think those are two stupid women tricks that would be useful to not have happen. So I think my most frustrating stupid men trick is learned helplessness, or as a friend of mine calls it, weaponized incompetence, which is when a man, and women can do this too, but in my experience, it's usually men, pretend not to know how to do something so that they don't have to keep doing it.
Yeah.
Right? And I know people fight over how the dishwasher is loaded, but someone who loads the dishwasher in such a completely incompetent manner that another person, usually their female partner, is going to have to come in and redo it. Otherwise, the dishes are not going to get washed. And that idea of I don't know how to do it. And I've worked with bosses who pretend not to understand technology, the basics of email, responses, don't know how to proofread. They will come up with all of these excuses to not do tasks they don't want to do, rather than just honoring, if a boss came to me and said, "I don't want to mess with proofreading this document," or "I don't want to do X," fine, own it. But this, "I don't know how, can you please help?" that makes me crazy, because it's almost always a woman that they are expecting to do whatever the work is. And sometimes it's actually not even a task. It's the emotional labor of help me regulate my emotions, help make me feel better. You have a face on. What's your face right now?
I'm thinking about my first job, serious editorial job out of college, was assistant editor at Defense Electronics magazine. And they had me, I was chief in bottle washing, all kinds of grunt work. We had a big telephone-esque book that had to be, proofread. And I was like, this is a waste of my talent. I could be writing stuff. And they said, "Hey, look, we got some help for you. We hired this new guy." The new guy came in and in about 30 seconds figured out there's no way I'm doing that grunt stuff. And so he blew it so badly. They said, "Eugene, could you help him figure out how to do it?" And I go, "Okay." He's draw up some plans so he can read and understand. And in the time it took me to draw up the plans, he had weaseled his way in and written 2 articles to prove that, maybe Eugene's just better off doing that. And I can take the, and I just thought that was sleazy and perfect. It was sleazy and perfect.
Right.
And but what I did do, I didn't have any time to fight. I had a limited amount of time on this planet. What I did was to do the grunt work and start writing articles. Right. Which then it was like escaladio, because I was like, when it came time to get a raise, I go, "I'm doing the grunt work and I'm writing as many articles as this guy. Is there any reason to not give me a raise?" And they were like, "Well reasoned, here's your raise." So, and then he eventually just left. So that was perfect. Yeah.
Can you think of a stupid men trick that you've noticed? And I've got a stupid women trick that I've noticed. Something about your own gendered dynamics or those of the men around you that you're like, that not so helpful.
Yeah, it's funny. Guys at jujitsu have accused me of being a woman many a time because, you know, four sisters, four daughters, you know, large numbers of female cousins, men and only born into my family like once every 50 years. So I find myself not so much employing what I believe to be a stupid metric, but I have seen them in action, and um, I find them disgusting. And I find them disgusting, just like I find the woman thing disgusting, because it's inorganic, and it's moreover it's fake. It's a scam. It's slick, and I don't like slick. You know, I prefer forthright. So the stuff I've seen is, you know, the hail fellow well met. You know, what I call bullshit, you know, glib charm. And I'm shocked, always shocked that it works. Always shocked that it works, you know. I mean, and it was a name of a horror movie, I remember. Humans are such easy prey. And I thinking, I'm sitting around looking at the room thinking, is anybody buying this? And I look at the room and everybody's buying it. No, I mean, there are guys I know in the Valley who have gotten their jobs just because it looks like central casting versions of what that job is. And they've not done a stitch of work. There's a guy, and this kid was an intern. I never saw him do anything but get the boss coffee. All right. He got a glowing recommendation and made his way to a scholarship at Vassar. I mean, but everybody loves him. Everybody talked about Mitch. Oh, we love Mitch. He did nothing by dint of his penis and testicles and some, you know, smooth charm. The guy like just was riding that straight to the top, and I guarantee you it will continue that way for the rest of his life. And to me, that's like the Spanish Special Olympic team. At one point, they all got busted because it turns out they were actually not special. And I started to think, so you faked having a disability to win a race. What do people say when they come to your house and they see that trophy on your shelf? You're not blind. Ah, well, you know, whatever. I mean, it's a dishonesty and inauthenticity that makes me sick. But you know, what is that? That Bud Schulberg thing. What makes Sammy run? A lot of Sammys, a lot of running. So.
Right. I mean, the one that the stupid women trick that I kind of sticks in my craw is when a woman will choose a male partner based on certain characteristics and then try to get him to change that. I wrote about this in my Substack last week, but the idea of like I know of women who came from military families, understood what being in the military entailed, frequent moves, deployments, married a man in the military who had evinced his desire to be a career military person. And then immediately, once they were married, started haranguing him nonstop to get him to leave the military. Right? Like women who meet, and this can, again, can be across genders, but it does feel like it's something I see women do. Women who, you know, are dating a man who is super into fantasy football and spends a lot of times with his friends on fantasy football, or super into, I don't know, jujitsu, like who has a hobby or a sport or an interest, especially one that he shares with friends, that is clear, that has always been. And then she gets married and wants to change it, not in a circumstance where there's a life change. Like I can understand, hey, there's a new baby. Maybe you don't get to play, you know, your video games with your friends for 6 hours a day. However, that's often not what it is. And I think what's interesting, you know, in the book Gone Girl, which there's a piece in the book that's really interesting where it talks about a group of women getting together talking about the men in their lives with such rancor. And the point that, and I mean, I read the book years and years ago, but it really struck me. It's like there are so many women who dislike men. And they will choose a partner, like the example of a woman who wants a man who makes a lot of money, who has a certain amount of financial stability. Okay, valid choice. But then if you marry that man, then you don't get to continually bitch and moan that he works too much. Because where do you think the money comes from? And that's the thing that I think is particularly frustrating is these women who, it's like they don't they can't connect the fact that the things that they like about their partner might be connected to what he, the fact that he goes to the gym every day, or that he and his friends have this, like hiking thing that whatever it is, they can't understand that. And it feels like a real, now that you are married, you must become a different person.
Oh, it's like somebody once said to me, and it sounded disgusting. They said to me when they were in my 20s, as my buddy's first wife, he's been married 4 times. His first wife said, relationships are about sacrifice and compromise. And I go, that sounds disgusting to me. I can deal with that with a job, but I'd like to imagine that every now and then we're coming to an accord. But I remember dating somebody who was like, man, you spend a lot of time at the gym. And I said, hey, what was the first thing you noticed about me? Yeah, well, what you noticed actually had to be developed by spending 2 hours in the gym every other day. So if you'd like me to be like, you want to see what I look like if I don't do that? Because that's always an option too, And she was like, "Okay, yeah, you're right. Pick me up after the gym." So I don't understand that, but I think that we also have. There's a great song by James Chance. Rest in peace. Just I think he died last year, and the title of the song and the main lyric of the song is "I don't want to be happy," and I think it's an epidemic. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people I know who have been divorced, and I've asked them, like, what happened? And they don't know. Like things were great, and then they got married, and then things were shitty, and then they got divorced, and now things are great again. It's very confusing.
That's an interesting model, the idea of like sacrifice and compromise. The question that I always have is who is doing the sacrificing and who is doing the compromising? Often it's not a mutual thing. Right. Often and this is, I've seen men do this and I've seen women do this. This is just a stupid relationship trick in general. Who is the one who is supposed to sacrifice and compromise, and what are they compromising on? And usually one person has a very specific idea of what marriage or relationship should look like and what makes them comfortable. And their idea is that the other person should sacrifice and compromise their comfort to make that person comfortable, right? There's not a lot of, because to me, the idea is like, it's negotiation. It's an understanding of like, what is it that makes you feel alive? And you know what? If going to the gym makes you feel alive, great. If like, whatever it is, what is the central important thing? Let's keep that central important thing and figure out what isn't as central and important that we can compromise on.
Also, I'm not interested in subjecting somebody else to the tyranny of my expectations. What I really want you to do is exactly what you would do if I wasn't here.
Right.
I'm much more interested in that. And I hate to quote this guy, but it's strangely enough, Ben Affleck, who's earning my respect over time. I've never really liked the guy, but he said, well, I just agree to everything, compromise, until I've had enough, and then I leave.
Right.
The idea that, I've recently come up with this idea of the percentage take, and I'm okay, 50%, 50%. I mean, in terms of your general level of happiness and unhappiness, I've charted for divorced people. They get married, they get divorced, they get remarried. They're over the course of time and a long enough timeline, their happiness is the same. So why bother to begin with in the first place? But in my mind, I think about, if your relationship is in a danger zone, if 90% of what you do together makes you unhappy, and it's only 10% that actually gives you pleasure, that's when people are having affairs. That's when dangerous things happen. But generally, I think healthy zones like 50-50. Like you may not like Baroque music and they like Baroque music. They put Baroque music on in the house. You go, I'm going to go into the garage. It's not a big deal. But when the numbers get grossly out of kilter, I think bad things tend to happen. And
but I love that.
What do you think about the Pascal? I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with Pascal's wager, right? So about the belief in God. You believe in God, and God doesn't exist, but you you lose a little fun. If you believe in God and God does exist, then maybe the kingdom of heaven is yours. If you don't believe in God and God doesn't exist, nothing happens. But if you don't believe in God and God does exist, then but it's the same kind of grid somebody has put together, and they look at two men together, two women together, a heterosexual grouping, and they over the course of time they look at divorce rates, and they find that lesbian relationships have the highest divorce rate. And some comedian is the one who tipped me to this, and I go, well, it's just a joke he's making. But then I looked up the study, and it actually, did some research into the numbers, and it actually bore out to begin. I mean, it's minute. It's like 2% difference. But what do you make of that?
Well, I think you missed part of the study. That
Okay,
of all of those different configurations,
yes,
the happiest marriages by an order of magnitude are between two lesbians.
And then what about the divorce rate?
Well, I think the idea is, I love this phrase, the tyranny of expectations. I think that there's an expectation in female-female relationships that there is going to be an emotional attunement, a closeness, we're going to talk things out, which can lead to a really high degree of satisfaction, a real high level of happiness, not to mention the fact that they're not floundering through gendered expectations about who cleans the toilets, right? So they have statistically the highest degree of satisfaction. But I think because they have this tyranny of expectations of this constant level of closeness, that if they can't attain that, then they feel like it's a fail. Whereas two men together have a much more kind of, they tend to be happy and have less divorce because they have a much more realistic understanding of marriage. Most men together that I know of and have heard of are not monogamous. They're not even trying. It's like, we're not like, this is ridiculous. We're two men. We run on testosterone. Let's not even pretend that monogamy is our jam. And I think monogamous long-term relationships between two men are the exception rather than the rule. They exist. And so I think that when you get to the heterosexual couplings, what you're dealing with is both people are carrying their gendered wounds and challenges. And there is the tyranny of expectations. And I think, particularly for women, we are fed this bullshit of like, our marriages, our wedding day is the happiest day of our life. And, you'll be fully fulfilled. You have to have a man. Yeah, la, 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 la. And so I think there is a tyranny of expectations. And I think if you ask most women, about what their expectations are for their happiness, it would not be 50, right? You just said 50% of okay and 50% of like, happy is right for you. I think a lot of women would say, oh, no. I need 80, 90. I can't just have him help around the house and help with the bills. He has to like listen to my problems, and we have to unpack things, and we have to process, which is, I think, another challenge where women don't understand. Like, there is a gender difference, especially with straight men, right? There's stuff there's a bunch of stuff I do not talk to my husband about because it's just not interesting to him. If I want to unpack the fuck out of something and discuss the nuances, I call my lesbian friend and we unpack and unpack and unpack. I know, it's just part of it is just like, I'm not expecting my husband to act the same as my lesbian friend, right? And recognize, and that's not a failure on his part. That is, he is a straight man. This is just sort of realistic.
I mean, to go back to the incel and to the manosphere, I have my needs 100% taken by jujitsu, as most of the guys in that community have realized that a long time ago. It's an hour and a half a day. If you go every day, if you go 3 times a week, it's usually an hour and a half. And, there's usually the warm-up session and then the session afterward where you kind of cool down and people are talking about mortgages, kids, divorce, wives are leaving, you guys are cheating on all manner of things. And that's like the one forum one healthy forum in which I think men actually communicate with each other. Because, I spend a lot of time as a bodybuilder. They don't do it in a weightlifting gym, not at all. But something about jujitsu breeds that kind of, and it's global. I'm here in Spain. I've gone to Italy, I've worked out in England, Poland. It is global. France, everywhere.
And that was really when I was thinking about like what could we say that's helpful for people who are facing some of these difficulties is I think if you are experiencing difficult gendered norms or expectations, go hang out with your people. And for men, not in the manosphere, not in a place that's negative. For women, not in a place where the topic of conversation is how shitty men are, but really in a place that allows you to talk to other people who have your shared experience. Right. Yep. And that's, to me, that's what I'm hearing you say jujitsu is for you. And, for me, I have a lot of different spaces where I hang out with women and we just are together in community. And a lot of times we're not talking about men at all, but just the idea of like, I need a space in this stormy political weather where I can just go be with my people, not have to explain anything. They understand and connect about whatever. And I really think that's the tonic.
Well, yeah, I'm smiling because just today, it won't surprise you to know that there are Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu question and answer columns. And one of the questions today was like, there's a woman in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and like she's hitting on me. What do I do? And this community, and this is probably the only place in the world where this answer would be delivered. Every single person in the answer section was like, do not do this. Absolutely do not do this. I've seen people have to leave gyms because of this. Do it. So either the person is clubhouse cancer and they're trying to get, to create some sort of unnecessary drama. But all of it is anti your training and you're there for training. And the guy was like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And he'll go in to train on Monday and the woman will be like, hey, what did you do this weekend? And he'll be like, not much. Great. Hey, nice to see you. And go on with his training if that's really what he's there for. And I thought, what a perfect breakdown. That's if I was still doing the sex column, that's exactly what I would say.
Exactly.
Keep it out of the workplace. Jiu-jitsu is your workplace. Keep it out of there.
Well, and one other note while we're talking about gender is there are women who love jiu-jitsu as much as you do. My daughter happens to be one of them, right? Who find that same sense of community and connection with 100%. Other women who are doing, who are doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So we're a little bit over time, but just quickly, did you have something else that you wanted? Did you have a fire me or some other observation you wanted to?
Yes. I was talking to somebody, the holidays, you're talking to a lot of folks who was on a PIP, which you're in management, you know what it is.
Performance improvement plan.
Right. And started this high-powered job and was expecting to be mentored. This was their second job out of college. And this was definitely not a place. It's like a Goldman Sachs type place where it's like, what's that line from that Snoop Dogg song? If you can't swim, you're going to drown. There's no help. There's no waiting for help. And your work performance is not being attended to. And they say, hey, guess what? You're on a PIP. And it's rare that people actually who are on those, they used to call them caps when I was at Intel, I think, but now PIP is accepted term. There are very few people who, once they're on it, manage to work their way off of it. This person actually not only worked their way off of it, but worked their way off of it so successfully, they signed a big deal with a big client, and they got a raise, and they were like, I don't think that's enough. Right, what do you mean? I go, I need a promotion too, and went in and got it. Right, so it's like, this is a business success story because usually it's like I was on a PIP and then they got me out of there without a severance. What do I do? But this is the case in which the person was like, okay, I understand what the opposition is like, and she will, I'm sure, go on in her career to offer mentoring where there was none for her, which is the best part about it. So,
well, and I want to say too, as somebody who's worked with clients who are putting people on PIPs, who have put a person on PIP, if you're going to put someone on a performance improvement plan, you as the manager need to be a good boss and commit to what you are going to do. Right. Yep. So when I put somebody on a PIP, I met with them for an hour every single week. Skills building, examples. So the idea of if like you've been leaving someone hanging out to dry and not giving them mentoring, training, guidance, a PIP is just a way to cover your ass with HR. Yep. If you really want to help them build, you as a leader need to commit to time, training, energy, and resources. So any PIP that anybody gets that doesn't have a real commitment on the part of the manager or the boss, not helpful. Okay.
Yeah, I think when she realized that help was not forthcoming, she buckled down and took care of business herself,
Right.
which is ultimately, told her all she needed to know about the place where she works.
Exactly. All right. That's all we have time for. Thanks for joining us. WTF@badbossbrief.com is our email. Send us any ideas that you have for future shows, any questions, advice. I read all of them and we'll respond. So have a great holiday season wherever you are in that process. And we will talk to you in a couple weeks. Thanks. Bye.
Adios. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Bad Boss Brief podcast with your host, Eugene S. Robinson and Stephanie Peirolo. You can check out more of their work by visiting speirolo.substack.com for Stephanie and eugenesrobinson.substack.com for Eugene. You can also find Eugene at Mr. Sleep 3, that's the number 3, on Insta. Reach out with your questions, concerns, worst case situations, or suggestions to us at WTF@badbossbrief.com. Stephanie will personally answer every single submission. Be sure to join us at badbossbrief.substack.com every other Wednesday for new episodes of Bad Boss Brief so you can gain further insights into your workplace environments. Until next time, don't be an asshole at work.